Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining for this afternoon session. For this session, we've got Michael Stringer on stage. He's going to present the event detection and response with AWS subject.
No worries, thanks. All right, well, thanks everyone for staying around for the afternoon sessions after lunch. It's always a time where people need to step out for school and that kind of thing, so I'm very glad to see you all here. I'm Michael Stringer. I'm a Principal Security Solutions Architect in the ANZ and Oceania Public Sector team. And my passion is security. You've probably heard it several times today already. Security is our top priority at AWS. And that's what I sincerely believe, and particularly working with public sector customers and protecting citizen data. So the agenda in the talk today, first of all, I'm just going to give an overview of AWS Security Hub and its capabilities. Then we're going to talk about taking action. And this means either incident response, manually taking action and responding to incidents that surface in Security Hub. And we'll also then talk about automating incident response as well through the Security Hub automated response and remediation solution. There'll be a demonstration video. It's going to be about 17 minutes where I'm actually going to show you how to build a couple of different incident response solutions in Security Hub. But first of all, I just want to talk to you about what problem statements AWS Security Hub is designed to resolve for customers. The first of these is a backlog of compliance requirements. So having multiple different compliance frameworks and regulatory compliance requirements in an organization, not enough time to build the controls, so you may be using things like AWS Config or other services, but having to manually build lots of controls and then measure compliance in your environment. And the second is too many security alert formats. Now, AWS is as guilty of this as anybody. All of our security, identity and compliance services were released over several years, and they weren't always entirely compatible with each other as far as data interchange goes. And this is also true of our security partner vendor solutions as well. And I always encourage lots of our customers to turn on all the security, identity and compliance services on the platform across all their accounts and across all regions. But this then generates a tsunami of logging information, alerts, monitoring info that's coming in from your accounts. It's very hard to spot the needle in the haystack and what's important and what needs priority to be actioned first. And the final issue is a lack of integrated view. So not having that single pane of glass dashboard environment where you're aggregating findings across your entire organization of AWS accounts. So that is what AWS Security Hub was designed to resolve for customers. It's designed to be our security posture management service, where I aggregate findings from AWS services and also from partner vendor solutions and also custom findings that can be streamed in. And it would then apply them via a schema, which is called the AWS Security Finding Format, which will normalize all of the findings so they can be easily interchanged with each other, and then we'll assign a priority to those findings. You can then use that to take action in the console, either manually through security operations teams who will be reviewing the findings as they come in, or you can build automated remediation solutions. So first use pattern for AWS Security Hub is for that single pane of glass for SecOps teams, incident response teams, where all the findings are being aggregated and prioritized in the console for you, and then teams can quickly take action. Second use pattern, which we commonly see with customers, you'll be having your own existing security incident event management platform scene. This could be something like Splunk or Sumo Logic or your own open source platform with using an Elk stack or whatever. But it's very easy to integrate with AWS Security Hub, where all of the findings are being aggregated in one place, and then integrate your existing SIEM solution. Third usage pattern is where you grant read-only access to the AWS Security Hub console for certain teams who may be operating certain workloads or accounts so that they can actually see what's happening. So AWS Security Hub, like I said, for all the other security, identity and compliance services, enable it at the organizations level. It is organizations aware. You can enable it once for your entire organisation. It'll automatically onboard new accounts from that point onwards. Also enable it for every region as well. It will then continuously aggregate and prioritise findings for you in the environment. But you can also apply automated compliance checks, and I'll talk about that in a bit more in a couple of slides, and take action based on findings. So AWS service integrations today in Security Hub are these 10 services here that you see on the board. There's more being added all the time. There'll be more integrations added, I think, towards the end of this year as well as the AWS service integrations. Today there are 81 partner integrations available as well. So chances are, if you are using an existing security vendor solution in your environment today, it most likely has an integration with AWS Security Hub available. So now I just want to talk about the benefits of AWS Security Hub. So first of all, talking about those compliance standards. There are free automated security checks available for compliance standards in Security Hub today. It has the AWS Foundational Security Best Practices. It has the CIS AWS Foundations benchmarks. And for payment card handling workloads, it also has the PCI DSS standard available as well. At the back end, when you deploy or to enable one of these security standards in the Security Hub console, it actually deploys a set of AWS config rules into config. So config is a requirement to enable one of these security standards. But it actually then deploys a managed set of rules linked back to this standard so it can report on compliance for all of the controls. And to just give you an example here, we have the CIS AWS Foundations benchmark. Today it has 40 free, fully automated checks directly linked back to the Foundations benchmark. Just give you an example of some of those findings here on the board. So things like avoiding the use of the root account for your accounts, ensure CloudTrail is enabled in all regions, and so on. But it's worth having a look in the security standard and having a check of all the 40 free controls that are available. So just give an example, again focusing on CIS AWS Foundations benchmark. For example, here on the bottom we have ensure IAM password policy requires at least one lowercase letter. When you're viewing the findings from a security standard in the console, you can then click on the blue hyperlink for the finding and bring up information about that particular finding and see what's triggering the response in Security Hub. So here we can see that we have 2 AWS accounts reporting this issue. You can then click on one of those findings and bring up a resources information page, which will give you more details about the exact issue. So it will tell you what account, the severity of the finding that's been rated by Security Hub. It will tell you what product or service has streamed in that finding into the Security Hub console. And it will then give you a severity label as well. As well as that, down the bottom, there's a resources tag where you can get more detailed, granular information about the resource in the account that reported the issue. And there's also a remediation tab at the bottom as well, which actually takes you to a link in the AWS documentation online on how to remediate this particular issue. Other standard that I want to talk about today is the AWS Security Foundations benchmark. And this is our own best practices for people operating AWS workloads and being secure. There's 189 checks available today. So we've been adding on average a dozen or so checks every couple of months since the launch of Security Hub. So it's up to 189 today. There will be more added over time. Give you an example of some of these checks here. Things like EBS snapshots should not be made public. Make sure you're blocking public access to S3 buckets, and so on. Now, the second benefit of using Security Hub is that aggregated findings console. So aggregated findings in Security Hub look like this, and it's updated in near real time as events stream into the console. It will report on how many minutes or seconds ago a finding was surfaced. And as you can see, you get severity, so you can sort on the severity, so you can prioritize critical and high findings first with security operations teams. You'll see what region is reporting issues. You'll see what product has reported the issue as well into Security Hub. And then you get the title for the finding. And very much like compliance standards, you can then click on the title here and bring up more information about that finding and the resources affected and how to remediate. Security Hub also has built-in insights, and these are pre-prepared dashboards for you to focus on particular areas of interest for your security posture. Now, to give you an example, there are 35 pre-built dashboards today, Things like EC2 instances that have missing patches, AMIs, they're reporting the most findings, Amazon machine images in your environment across your accounts. And you can actually build your own dashboards as well in the console. So you can customize and build your own insight dashboards and add them to the insights. But this is the crux of the talk today, and what the majority of the demo will be focusing on is taking action with Security Hub. So it's all very well to collect all that information, but related back to the problem statements, so many alerts coming into the system, but it's what you do with that information that counts. And the two typical patterns that we see: custom actions built in AWS Security Hub, and we'll give more details about that in a second, and also then streaming findings out to trigger actions with either other AWS services or partner solutions using CloudWatch events. So let's look at custom actions first. So a custom action in Security Hub can be defined by you, the users, and it can be extensible to carry out nearly any function. So the example here is when a particular finding surfaces in the console, you can choose a custom action for that finding and trigger a response. In this case, it's going to be send an email. But it could easily be page a team, open a ticket in a ticketing support system, post it into your SIEM solution, and also carry out automated remediation. So setting up custom action is pretty simple, and I'll show you more of this in the demo. But you just create a custom action, and what you need to do here at the bottom is create a unique custom action ID. And what actually happens is this gets sent in a stream from Security Hub to CloudWatch, into CloudWatch events. So all the findings will be continuously streamed into CloudWatch events from Security Hub. And for that particular finding that you've set a custom action ID for, it will then add that to the stream and for that particular finding into CloudWatch events. You can then use that as a filter for a CloudWatch events rule, which will look for that particular custom action ID and can then trigger a response. Now, that kind of response could be trigger a Lambda function to automatically remediate the issue. It could be streaming it into another solution, such as Kinesis data streams, or sending it into step functions or another service. It could also be then streaming it out to things like SNS, as I said earlier, send an email. Or it could also be things like using Systems Manager, Patch Manager. So the findings for Patch Manager will be streaming into Security Hub, saying patches are missing on some EC2 instances. You can then use it to trigger a remediation task by sending a run command back through Systems Manager to run a patch update. Now, just to give you an overview of how this works. So AWS Security Hub is always streaming all of its findings into CloudWatch events. And this is time-based, so it's streaming them as they arrive into the Security Hub console. And using your custom action IDs and setting up custom actions, you can then add a custom action ID to trigger a response. So that response is then triggered by a CloudWatch event rule, which could be Lambda, step functions, other service. And this could be done in parallel, so it could be triggering multiple responses at once. So it could be posting in a Slack channel, it could be sending an email, it could be opening a ticketing in your ticketing system, it could be paging teams, and so on, and also triggering an automated response. As well as that, using pretty much the same pattern, CloudWatch events can then stream it into other AWS services for action or into partner solutions. And it's exactly the same pattern as you saw using native custom action IDs. AWS Security Service or partner solution detects an issue. It then streams those findings into Security Hub, sends it on to CloudWatch events, set a rule, and then you can trigger an appropriate response. Now, for automating response today on AWS Security Hub, we have a solution available. It's called the AWS Security Hub Automated Response and Remediation Solution, which is available on our website. And what this does is it deploys a stack set into your admin account for a Security Hub, and you can also deploy it into your member accounts as well. And what it does is it pre-populates all the custom actions for each of the security standards that are available. So it has pre-populated playbooks for AWS Security Foundation's best practice, CIS, and for the PCI DSS standard. It also builds all of the CloudWatch event rules for you and the triggers and the associated Lambda functions, and deploys a step functions state machine to actually carry out remediation via Systems Manager. But enough about talking about what it does. Now I'm going to show you what it actually does in the console. So here in the demo, I'm going to show you two things. Part one, we'll be creating a custom action here in the Security Hub console. Part two, I'm going to demonstrate the AWS Security Hub automated response and remediation solution. I'll talk about that more when we get to that part of the demo. First, we're going to start here in the AWS config console. And what we're going to do is deploy a managed rule. And this particular managed rule is going to look for a compliance state for S3 bucket default lock enabled, i.e. it's going to look to see whether the S3 buckets in the account have object lock enabled or not. So what we need to do is add rule, make sure it's an AWS managed rule. We'll just search for the rule I want to deploy. And then we select the correct rule at the bottom, click on next, leave it on the default settings for the rule, next again, and then click on add rule. After a second, you'll get this message at the top of the screen that the rule has been added to the account. What we'll now do is we'll just quickly jump to that rule, which is here. So now what we're going to do, it's going to go to the S3 console, and we're going to create a bucket, because object lock can only be turned on at the time of bucket creation. So we need to create a new bucket. We're going to do that here, and we're going to call this mic test bucket 1. And we'll just look at all of our settings for this bucket. We want to go into advanced settings, and we'll make sure that object lock is disabled. And then we shall create the bucket. Alright, so after a second, we have a note saying that mic test bucket 1-string has been created for us. And we can go and view the details of this bucket. Look at our properties for this bucket. And as per the settings we chose, we can see that object lock is not enabled. And as I said earlier, as noted here, Amazon S3 does not currently support enabling object lock after a bucket has been created. Okay, now that we've created an S3 bucket that will fail the compliance check with the managed rule, what we want to do is go back to the config console. And for the rule that we have here, we'll say re-evaluate. Okay, so we've just re-triggered the rule. And what we want to do is just wait and then check here. And we can see that my bucket has come up as non-compliant. So what we're going to do in Security Hub is we're going to create a custom action, which I talked about earlier in the presentation. So this custom action we're going to create is going to be called send Mike an email. What I'm going to get it to do is send me an email alert for the failure of this particular custom action. So we'll give it a description as well, which is mandatory. So we'll say send Mike an email when S3 object lock is disabled on a bucket. And we have to give it a custom action ID. So this is the special source of a custom action rule, where you have to give it a unique ID, which will be attached to the event as it's streamed to CloudWatch events from Security Hub. And this means that we can then filter looking for our particular custom action ID. So we're going to call it email Mike. And create our custom action. So you now see that we have our custom action here in the list, send Mike an email. What we're going to do next is we're going to go into simple notification service, and we're going to create a topic. And this is so it can actually use SNS to send an email to my mailbox. So we'll just create a standard SNS topic, and we shall call it send Mike an
email from Security Hub. Create that. Okay, so we see it's created a topic for us. And now I'll create a subscription. And this is where I'll subscribe my email account to this particular SNS topic. Mailbox created just for this event at my own domain. And we create the subscription. So what I've done now from SNS, it will send a confirmation email to my mailbox, which we have here. So we get our subscription confirmation, we open that, confirm our subscription, and now we're subscribed to the SNS topic. So that's all the pre-work done. So we've created a custom action with custom action ID. We've created an SNS topic to send an email to this mailbox. Now what we have to do is go into CloudWatch Events. All right, so here in the CloudWatch Events console, or Amazon Event Bridge as it's also now known as, we're going to create a rule which is going to look specifically for the custom action ID I created earlier in Security Hub. So we're going to create a rule, and for simplicity's sake, we'll stick with my naming convention, email Mike. Next. Okay, and here is where we're going to pick an event source, and in this case we want to filter for events coming from AWS Security Hub. You'll see here for event sources there'll be lots of different services listed where you can filter on. So you can use CloudWatch events and rules and filtering to trigger multiple things from lots of different services, so it's very extensible. But in this case, for this demo, we're concentrating on Security Hub. So we choose Security Hub, and here in event type, you'll see you get a choice of events. So you can stream all events through the filter. Calls by API calls by CloudTrail, custom action, reported findings, or insight findings. In this case, because we're looking for our custom action, we'll filter on that. You'll see here on the right, it gives a sample code. What we need to do is edit our pattern, because we're going to make some changes here. And what we need to do is add in a line that's going to filter for our particular resource, which is the custom action ID. And we put in the ARN. And this ARN is the ARN of our custom action ID. So if I go back to the Security Hub console, I've actually got the ARN here, so I can just select that, copy it, and bring it back to EventBridge, and paste it in there. So we'll just check. So we have our resource now defined, looking for our particular custom action ID that we created, email Mike. Okay, now I'm happy with that. Say next. And this is where you choose the target. So first we've done the filter for the CloudWatch event, and now we want to choose a target. In this case, as I said earlier, we're going to send an email using SNS. So what we want to do is use SNS topic, and it'll then ask us to choose the topic to send it to, and we'll use the one I created earlier. And then click on next. We're not going to add any tags. Review and create. So we check our settings here. Email Mike, filtering on our particular custom action ID, setting it to this SNS target, and we create the rule. Okay, so now we have created our event rule filter. And what we need to do is get back to the Security Hub console and go to our findings list. So this is the aggregation of all the findings that are streaming into Security Hub. And what we want to look for is our particular finding where it has triggered that config rule. And what we want to do is for this particular finding, we choose it here on the left. And at the top of the screen, we choose an action. And we'll see that I've got our custom action ID that we created earlier here, send Mike an email. So we trigger that, and we say at the top of the screen, it's now been streamed into CloudWatch events to trigger that finding. And if we go to our email box, we'll see that we've now received a notification message. Now let's look at part 2, where we're going to talk about the AWS Security Hub automated response and remediation solution, which is available here on our website. And it's deployed as a CloudFormation stack set. But what it does for you is it will deploy playbooks aligned with each of the free security standards that are available in the Security Hub console. So it will deploy individual custom actions for each of the controls for CIS Foundations benchmark, also for the AWS Security Foundations, and also for the PCI DSS standard as well. What it does, it'll pre-populate all the CloudWatch rules for you, and with unique custom action IDs associated with each of the compliance controls for those standards. It will also populate AWS Lambda function to be triggered by the rules, and it populates this into then trigger a step function state machine, which will actually call on an automation document stored in AWS Systems Manager, and this will actually then trigger the remediation task for a particular resource or resources and for that particular compliance control. I'm going to go to the Security Hub console, and as we talked about earlier in the presentation, here's the free security standards that are available. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use the AWS Foundational Security Best Practices today. So we shall go in and view the results. Now I'm going to trigger a particular finding today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new CloudTrail log that doesn't have encryption enabled, and that's going to then trigger a foundational security best practice non-compliance finding. So if we filter here in the list, it's this particular finding here. CloudTrail should have encryption at rest enabled. We'll go to EventBridge. What we have here on screen is the pre-populated rule that was created by the Security Hub Automated Response and Remediation solution. So in this case, CloudTrail 2 auto trigger. We can look at the event pattern, and you'll see it's a bit different to the one we created earlier, but you'll see it's looking for imported Security Hub findings. It's looking for a particular compliance status of failed or warning, and it's been generated by this particular ID for CloudTrail.2. Okay, and for targets, in this case, it's passing it to a state machine in step functions. So if I go to the step functions console, I can show you that here. So we have a state machine created here, and the workflow defined in the state machine looks like this. So what we actually have here is we'll get the finding data from the input from EventBridge, and it will then trigger a response. So it'll come over here, look for an automation doc stored in Systems Manager that matches this particular control, and then we'll execute the remediation. It will wait for a response back from Systems Manager, success or fail, and then it will report a result back here. So we look in Systems Manager, this is the automation doc that we have. So this automation doc is then going to trigger an automatic remediation of CloudTrail and go into CloudTrail directly and enable encryption for any CloudTrail logs that have it disabled. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new CloudTrail log. So we'll create it here. We shall call it MikeTrail 001. We're going to use an existing S3 bucket I have in my demo account, S3 test bucket. And what we want to make sure is when we scroll down, that encryption is not enabled. We leave it all on the rest of the default settings and create our CloudTrail. So we have our new CloudTrail log, and as you can see here, encryption not enabled. What we want to do is trigger a non-compliance result. And to do that, the security standards that are used in Security Hub at the back end when they're enabled actually deploy config rules, similar to what we saw earlier in part 1. So what we want to do here is re-evaluate our environment. And it says refresh to see the latest evaluation results to report on a result. But as you can see, it took a few seconds. And we'll go to mic trail 1. And we can see that the resource is non-compliant. And the rule that's been triggered is that Security Hub Cloud Trail. Okay, so what's happened now is we've triggered a non-compliance result for that particular Cloud Trail log that's not enabled. So this should now have streamed into our Security Hub console as a finding. So what we want to do is go into that particular check, and we'll see now that mic trail 1 has failed a few seconds ago. So what we want to do now is we can select, and this is very similar to earlier, select and choose our custom action ID. Now in this case, the Security Hub Automated Response and Remediation solution has created remediate with SHA. Choose that, and you'll see it's then been streamed to CloudWatch events. Now what we want to do is go to our step function and look for our execution. So here's a new one that is running on the list. And if we have a look, we see the status that's currently running for our solution. So what's happening right now, it's now sending out the result to Systems Manager. It's validated that it's a valid custom action ID. It has an associated automation doc stored in Systems Manager, and it's now executing that for us in real time. So if we go to Systems Manager, and as you can see, pass the input, execute a remediation, and update the finding. Have a look at our log. We refresh the screen, and we can see a KMS key has now been linked to the Cloud Trail log, and it has started encrypting the log at rest.
All right. Now you may be thinking from that solution, everything there looked like it was manual, and that's true with the way the Security Hub Automated Response and Remediation solution is deployed. But it's a very simple task for the particular controls that you want to be automatically remediated. Is just go into the CloudWatch event rules that have been created. By default, they'll be set as disabled, which means they won't trigger automatically. So you need to trigger them manually by doing that remediate with SHA custom action in the console. But if you want them to automatically remediate, you just set the CloudWatch event rule to enabled, and it will automatically trigger the remediation for you without any interaction. All right, now just to wrap up before we can have some questions at the end, but as you probably heard in previous presentations today, we need to highlight we have AWS Skills Builder available for all of our users on the platform. There's over 500 digital free courses available in Skills Builder. It also helps you plan out your learning path as well to a particular certification or a particular specialty, such as security. And also AWS certifications. So this can be instructor-led training, and we can also organise training and build out things like Skills Guild and Cloud Alliance planning for your agencies as well. All right, so thanks very much for listening to the talk. I'll just leave that on screen for the feedback. Please provide feedback if you can for the sessions. It helps us improve the content that we'll deliver at future summits. But just opening up for questions. Thank you. So the question is, can the child accounts in Security Hub have different rule sets? You can only, today, have the free security standards that are available, and that will be associated with all of the accounts in the environment. There is a forthcoming feature release in the near future for Security Hub, where you'll be able to customise that further per account and per workload. Any other questions? Cool. All right, thank you very much, everyone.